The whistle of the kettle broke the silence. I was alone, truly alone, for the first time in years. And in that quiet, I felt something I couldn't name at first. Space. He said he gave me everything. And maybe he did. Everything but freedom. The most dangerous part? I thought it was love. There's a secret about control no one talks about. It doesn't always look like harm. Stay with me till the end. And tell me, have you ever felt like this? Don't forget to like and subscribe. I moved to the city on a Tuesday in March, 3 weeks after burying my father. The apartment I rented was small, 3rd floor, facing a courtyard that echoed with the sounds of other people's lives, but it felt like the first honest space I'd ever occupied. I was 34, newly untethered, and desperate to remember who I was before grief and obligations had rewritten me. I'd been a designer once. Not just the career, the identity. I used to sketch during meetings, see color in everything, wake up with concepts blooming in my mind like something alive. But the last 5 years had been about managing my father's decline, and somewhere in that exhaustion, I'd let that part of myself hibernate. The city felt like permission to wake up again. I took the design freelance contract without hesitation. Small projects at first, branding for startups, identity systems for boutiques, but it felt like remembering a language I'd nearly forgotten. My old apartment filled with mood boards and fabric samples. I went to gallery openings alone. I had coffee with colleagues who still remembered my name. For the first time in years, I wasn't defined by someone else's emergency. That's when I met him. It was at a dinner party, hosted by a colleague of my father's, a networking obligation I almost declined. He was talking about art when I arrived, gesturing with the kind of unself-conscious confidence that belongs to men who've never been questioned. Tall, tailored. The kind of attractive that doesn't call attention to itself because it doesn't have to. "You're Elena's daughter," he said when I was introduced, and something in how he said it, like he'd been waiting for this, made me pause. "She mentioned you were a designer." "Was," I said, trying again. He smiled. "The trying is the real part. The rest is just life getting in the way." His name was Marcus. He worked in investment, had traveled extensively, spoke 3 languages fluently. Over dinner, he asked me questions the way someone asks when they're actually curious, not performing interest, but genuinely wanting to know. He laughed at my stories. He remembered details I mentioned casually. When I said I'd been isolated for years, he reached across the table and briefly touched my hand. "That ends now," he said. It wasn't a promise. It was a statement of fact. He started appearing in my life with the kind of strategic precision that felt like coincidence. He'd text about an exhibition I mentioned wanting to see. He'd already have tickets. He'd invite me to dinners with interesting people, always making sure I was seated where the conversation would excite me. He wore well-tailored suits and had opinions about wine. He was fluent in the language of sophistication, and that language had been dead to me for so long that hearing it again felt like coming home. Within weeks, he was offering me money to focus purely on design, the way you deserve to. His phrasing was always genteel, never demanding, just available. Like a door that had been locked was suddenly opening and all I had to do was walk through. "I have enough saved," I said, uncomfortable with the proposition. "Of course you do," he said. "But why should you have to? I want you to create, Isabelle. I want to give you that freedom." No one had ever offered me freedom before. I mistook it for love. The proposals came quickly. Marriage was a word that appeared between kisses, in whispered conversations at 2 a.m., until suddenly it was the logical conclusion to a narrative I'd stopped questioning. We married in a courthouse, then at a cathedral. His preference. The reception was at an elegant restaurant, and I remember standing in a white dress, watching guests congratulate him, wondering when he became the main character of my own life. The mansion was perfect in the way that things purchased by someone else's taste always are. Not quite yours, but close enough that you stop noticing the difference. Marcus had suggested we move there almost immediately. A fresh start for us. Somewhere worthy of you. And I'd agreed because I didn't yet understand that the space was the first of many gifts that were actually choices made for me. The closets were filled with clothes he'd selected. The art on the walls reflected his preference, not mine. Even the books on the shelves had been curated. I'd wake up in rooms decorated by someone else's vision and forget that I'd ever had my own. The first gentle corrections were so small I almost missed them. "That color doesn't suit you," he'd say if I wore something he hadn't selected. Not cruelly, with concern, as if he was protecting me from looking foolish. Or, "You talk too much about your work at dinners. People find that exhausting in women." I'd nod and recalibrate, grateful for his honesty. My former colleagues would call with project opportunities, and I'd have to decline, because Marcus needed me at home, or a client dinner was coming up, or he simply preferred I didn't work. "You're more fulfilled this way," he'd say. "I can see it. You're glowing." I was disappearing. But disappearance is gradual. It happens in small surrenders, and you don't notice because each surrender feels reasonable in the moment. I suggested going back to freelancing after 6 months. He'd laughed, not unkindly, and said, "Why would you need to? Everything you want is here." "I like designing," I said. "You like the idea of it. But you never finish projects anyway. Not really. You start things and abandon them. It's a pattern with you." I wanted to argue, but there was a grain of truth there, wasn't there? I had abandoned projects. I was inconsistent. Maybe he saw something I couldn't see about myself. The social isolation happened without conversation. My sister called one evening, and Marcus mentioned, very softly, that her energy seemed chaotic, and whether I thought that was healthy for me. I started declining her invitations. My old friend Sarah came to visit, and afterward, he said she seemed envious of what we have, and wasn't it exhausting to maintain friendships with people who resented your happiness? I stopped returning calls. What he offered instead was proximity. He was always there, always attentive, always managing the details of life so I wouldn't have to. He handled the bills, the accounts, the investments. When I asked for money, he'd hand me cash, a certain amount, enough for groceries and small things, but never so much that I could accumulate independence. "I'm just protecting our finances," he'd explain. "You're brilliant at design, Isabelle, but money management isn't your strength. Let me handle this." I believed him. Or I wanted to, because belief required less effort than doubt. There were small moments where something flickered, a memory of the person I'd been. I'd see a design project online and feel a phantom ache. I'd catch my reflection and not quite recognize the woman looking back. But he'd notice these moments and preempt them, bringing home a designer magazine or saying something like, "You know, if you really wanted to, you could work from home. I wouldn't stop you." But we both knew I wouldn't. The infrastructure of that freedom had already been dismantled. 2 years in, I asked for my own credit card. It was a Tuesday morning. I was sitting across from him at breakfast, and the request came out so quietly I almost didn't recognize it as my own voice. I wanted the ability to spend money without asking. The phrasing I chose was careful. For convenience. For when you're not available. He set down his coffee and looked at me with an expression I'd learned to read as disappointment. "Isabelle," he said, "why would you need that? I give you everything. Anything you want, you just have to ask. Why does it need to be complicated?" "It's not complicated. It's just what? Don't you trust me to provide for you? Is there something you want that you're not telling me about?" "No, Then I don't understand the request. Help me understand." I couldn't. I tried to articulate something about autonomy, but the words sounded ungrateful in my own mouth. He reached across the table and took my hand. "You have everything a woman could want," he said softly. "A beautiful home, security, my love. And you're still not satisfied. Why do you always have to want more? I apologized. I told him he was right. The conversation ended with him kissing my forehead and saying, "I just want to protect you. That's all I've ever wanted." 6 months later, I pushed the issue of returning to work. "I miss designing," I said. I could take on small projects, remotely, so it wouldn't interfere with anything. His face remained pleasant, but something hardened behind his eyes. "We've discussed this. I know, but I've been thinking." "You've been thinking," he repeated, "without consulting me, without considering how this affects me, affects us." "I wasn't. It's my career. Your career is being my wife. Your career is maintaining this home and being present for me. If you're bored, we can fix that. I can increase our social obligations. We could travel. But a job? Isabelle, that feels like rejection." "It's not rejection. It feels like you're telling me I'm not enough, that what I provide isn't enough. Do you know how that makes me feel?" I didn't. I only knew how it made me feel. Small, guilty, wrong. He stood and left the room. I sat alone at the breakfast table for 3 hours, waiting for him to return and forgive me. When he did, he'd brought flowers and booked us a vacation to Tuscany. We didn't discuss the job again. The control had become so seamless by then that I'd stopped noticing it was control. It felt like love. It felt like he was just very, very good at understanding what I needed, which was him, always him, never anyone or anything else. By the 3rd year, I couldn't remember the password to any of our accounts. I didn't know what we spent money on. I had no idea if we had debt or savings. These were details he managed, and when I asked, he'd say, "You don't need to worry about these things. Your job is to be happy." I was the opposite of happy. I was numb. I moved through the mansion like a ghost, participating in elaborate dinner parties where he'd introduce me as his muse, his greatest creation. I'd smile and hold his arm and feel nothing at all. One evening, getting ready for a gala, I caught him watching me from the bedroom doorway. His expression was unreadable. When I asked what he was thinking, he said, "I'm thinking about how beautiful you are, how lucky I am, how I'd never let you go, not even if you asked." He said it like a promise. It felt like a threat. It started with a simple request. My mother was ill, nothing life-threatening, but she needed surgery, and I wanted to visit her for a week. I mentioned it casually over dinner, expecting he'd drive me to the airport. Instead, he set down his fork and said, "No?" "No?" I repeated, as if the word didn't make sense. "I need you here. I have the charity gala. The Hendersons are coming for dinner Saturday, and my mother is visiting. I can't manage all of that without you." "You could, for a week. A week is too long. You don't need to be there. Your siblings can handle it. She's my mother. And I'm your husband, and I'm saying no." I'd learned not to push back, but something in me, something ancient and furious, pushed anyway. "I'm going," I said quietly. "She needs me." His expression didn't change, but his hand shot across the table and grabbed my wrist. Not hard enough to bruise, but hard enough to make a point. The grip lasted maybe 3 seconds. Then he released me and smiled. "I think you're confused about how this works," he said, as if we were having a pleasant conversation. "You don't make decisions anymore. I do. That was the arrangement. You gave me that power." He was right. I had. In signing the papers, in accepting the credit cards he refused to give me, in letting him manage every aspect of my life. I had given him the authority to confine me. "I want to visit my mother," I whispered. "No, you don't. You want to feel autonomous, but you're not. You're mine, and I'm not letting you go." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the dark next to him, listening to his breathing, and felt something crystallize. Not courage, clarity. For the first time in 4 years, I understood that the beautiful cage was still a cage. The next morning, while he was at work, I did something small and terrifying. I opened the kitchen drawer where he kept spare cash and took every dollar, maybe $800. I found my passport in his office desk. I called a number I'd memorized years ago before I forgot how to have secrets. Sarah answered on the second ring. I said only, "Can I come stay with you?" She didn't ask questions. She gave me an address. I packed a single suitcase. Not because I was being strategic, I just couldn't carry more. I put on jeans and a jacket, things I knew weren't his favorites, and I walked to the front door. The doorman, Marcus had always controlled how much I interacted with him, looked up from his desk. Something in his eyes suggested he'd been expecting this moment for a very long time. "Take care of yourself," he said quietly. That was all. I called an Uber without looking back at the building. In the car, I realized my hands weren't shaking. I felt lighter than I had in years. Sarah's apartment was small and chaotic, and I loved it immediately. The first thing I did was take a shower and cry. Not the controlled, silent crying I'd perfected at the mansion, but something that came from my chest and shook my whole body. Then I slept for 14 hours. When I woke, Sarah had left coffee and a note. "Kitchen is yours. Do whatever you need to do." That seems like a small thing. But after years of the kitchen being his domain, of me asking permission to eat, to taste, to take up space, the liberty of making my own coffee felt revolutionary. I stood there for 5 minutes just holding the cup, watching steam rise from it, marveling at the simplicity of that act. The first week was survival mode. Sarah helped me call a lawyer. The divorce was going to be complicated. He had most of our assets in his name. But the lawyer said it was possible. I filed a police report about the financial control, though the officer's expression suggested this wouldn't amount to much. I called my mother, who cried when she heard my voice, and my sister, who didn't ask what happened, just said, "Come home when you're ready." I wasn't ready yet. Ready felt like a destination, and I was still learning how to walk. Sarah had a couch that became my bed. I slept there for 2 months while I figured out the logistics of separating my life from his. I applied for jobs using my real name again. Isabelle Chen, designer. Not Mrs., not his appendage, just me. A small startup hired me. Remote work, flexible hours, reasonable pay. Enough to eventually afford my own place. On my first day, I set up a workspace in the corner of Sarah's living room and cried again, but this time from something closer to relief. The reconstruction happened slowly. I reconnected with my mother, who held my hand and said nothing, which was exactly what I needed. I saw my sister again, really saw her, and apologized for the years of distance. She told me she'd been waiting for me to come back. I had no idea it was that obvious. I got my own apartment. It was small and unfurnished, and I loved decorating it myself. I chose colors that made me happy. Jewel tones, warm neutrals. I hung artwork that meant something to me. I filled the kitchen with tools I'd never owned before. I learned to cook for one. 4 months after leaving, I received a certified letter from Marcus's lawyer. He was contesting the divorce, claiming I'd abandoned him without cause, and demanding custody of assets. I read it once and felt the familiar panic rise, the habitual response to his demands. Then I noticed something. I was reading it from my own apartment, in my own space, with my own money in the bank. He couldn't follow me here. He couldn't manage me anymore. I hired the lawyer and moved forward. The design work became consuming. I was good at it, better than I'd ever been, because now I was designing for myself, not trying to prove something to anyone. I took on projects that excited me. I built a portfolio. I was offered a position at a mid-size firm, and I took it. 6 months after leaving, I framed an illustration I'd designed, a simple geometric pattern in golds and deep blues. It represented nothing in particular, but I'd created it purely for the pleasure of creation. I hung it in my living room. Beside it, I placed a small plant. Not an orchid. Something hardier. Something that could survive neglect. I watered it regularly, not from obligation, but because I wanted to see it grow. One morning, making my own coffee, I caught my reflection in the window. I recognized myself. I traded comfort for freedom, I thought, and I didn't realize until too late that they were never the same thing. It wasn't a profound realization, but it was mine, and that made all the difference. How many times do we mistake control for care? I've asked myself this question every single day since I left. Because the insidious thing about the kind of abuse that hides behind generosity is that it doesn't feel like abuse. It feels like someone who loves you so much that he wants to protect you from the world, from yourself, from the supposedly poor decisions you'd make if left to your own devices. But protection and control are different things. Protection respects the autonomy of the person you're protecting. Control erases it. I spent 4 years in a beautiful prison, and the worst part was how much I wanted to stay. How much I'd been taught to want to stay. A woman who doesn't work, who has no access to money, who has no friends, who depends entirely on one person for her sense of self-worth. That woman is trapped. Not by walls, but by architecture, by the slow dismantling of every other option. When he said, "I'll take care of everything," what he meant was, "I'll take care of you by taking everything. Your choices, your autonomy, your friends, your work, your sense of who you are when no one's watching." And I let him. I was lonely, grieving, desperate for someone to tell me I was safe. He told me that. And the price was everything else. If this story sounds familiar, if someone in your life is being quietly controlled by financial dependence, isolation, or the slow erosion of her autonomy, don't let her stay in that silence. The doorman at my building knew what was happening. He never said anything, but I saw it in his eyes. The resignation of someone who watches this pattern repeat and feels powerless to stop it. Don't be that doorman. If you know someone whose choices are being managed by a partner, who doesn't have access to her own money, who's isolated from friends and family, who's being told she's not capable of making decisions, reach out. Send her a text that says, "I see you. I'm thinking of you." Leave her an address, a phone number, a reminder that there's a way out. Don't lecture her. Don't tell her to leave. She already knows, on some level. She's just terrified of what comes after. She's confused about whether what's happening is love or harm, because he's used the language of love to describe his control. What she needs is evidence that she can survive outside of him. That there are people who will hold space for her without requiring her to disappear. That freedom isn't as scary as the alternative. I had Sarah. I had a lawyer. I had a job that hired me back even after 4 years of absence. I had the privilege of resources, money, education, a family that wanted me back. Not everyone has all of those things, but everyone deserves to know. There are people waiting for you on the other side of this. Not to rescue you, you'll rescue yourself, but to remind you that you were always worthy of rescue, that your autonomy was never his to take. The silence is the worst part, the way nobody speaks about what they see, the way we let women disappear into mansions and call it love. So speak. See her. Don't let her be alone with it, because comfort is never worth freedom, and a gilded cage is still a cage.